Hi, I'm Dollar Tree Diogenes, and today I'm going to be talking about challengers and the meaning of life. Challengers is about the hottest people in a generation. Challengers is about how tennis is everything everywhere all at once. Challengers is what happens when me and the boys don't kiss each other enough. Challengers is about God, I think. Challengers is a 2024 movie written by Justin Kurtzis and directed by Luca Guadagnino. It follows the lives of ex-rising tennis star Tashi, pro tennis player in a losing streak Art, and aging underdog Patrick. The story goes back and forth between the mid-2000s when besties Patrick and Art try to win over Tashi's favor by playing really good tennis, and 2019 when past besties Patrick and Art try and win over Tashi's favor by playing really good tennis again. Except now the stakes are higher because Art and Tashi are married and have a kid. As the film unravels, Challengers begins to add more and more detail between the tangled histories and feelings these three people have for each other. But everything continues to spiral closer and closer to the last game in the 2019 New Rochelle Challenger, which takes on an increasing amount of weight as the film goes on, because this is a club tournament with a grand prize of $7,000. But it's also the tournament Tashi hopes will get rich person Art out of his head in order to win a US Open and complete his career Grand Slam. Patrick, on the other hand, is playing to hopefully nab an opportunity to compete for a spot in the same US Open. But Patrick also wants to play and win way more than Art does, a quality which Tashi recognizes and appreciates. In the last 2 minutes of Challengers, Tashi, Art, and Patrick are all desperately trying to grasp something which then causes everything else to fade. Nothing else is important. All there is tennis. Okay, I'm gonna commit an art sin now. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a book written by an asshole about a bunch of assholes. In it, Dorian models for a portrait which then allows him to be young forever, while the painting ages in his place. Dorian Gray carries his past into the present through his boyish beauty, and then very quickly becomes the worst person to ever live on the planet Earth. Like, in this one part of the novel, Dorian's showing off his actor fiancée Sybil Vane to his bachelor friends, but she's lost her ability to act since she's just so in love with Dorian, so Dorian breaks off the engagement because he hates that he's corrupted beauty and talent, and Sybil just doesn't have value to him anymore. Sybil then promptly kills herself, and Dorian goes on living young, not feeling too bad because he's got the boys. He's got the boys. He's got the homoerotic boys. In much of the European canon, we've had these little instances pop up where two bros broed up so hard that young women in liberal arts colleges ship them as a couple. Gilgamesh may have had sex with countless new wives, but Enkidu was his only love. Ophelia may have killed herself after a breakup with Hamlet, but it's like a week later when Horatio tells Hamlet, dying in his arms, "Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." We have all these instances in the canon where it's clear a man can have a woman, but prefers to be known by men. And even though I'm not going to argue all these fictional men have a Kinsey scale score of 0, it's more than just dudes falling deeply in love with their bros, right? In all these works I've brought up, these men have, on one level or another, dismissed the company of a woman in order to be with men, sometimes in turn narratively leading to the death of that woman. While they can sometimes feel bad about it, these men often move on with the plot relatively quickly because pacing is more important than a woman's life when you're writing a play or inventing what will later become the novel. In literature, things happen for reasons based on cultural values, and the same usually goes for philosophy. In Plato's Symposium, a bunch of guys get drunk and talk about love until it's Socrates' turn, and he says the highest form of love is to pursue beauty by chilling and hanging out with the boys. We know this is the best way to engage with love in the dialogue because towards the end of his speech, Socrates' ex bursts in super drunk and tries to seduce Socrates, who just refuses because he gave this big speech about hanging with the boys and talking is way better than the erotic, romantic love of two monogamous partners. And even though Socrates learned all this from his mentor Diotima, there are no women present in the symposium. These important matters of love and passion are only fit to be discussed by men. Remember, in philosophy and literature, things happen for reasons based on cultural values. And patriarchy is a cultural value. I am so sorry to the women out there watching this video, but I do gotta cover the concept of patriarchy real quick. Here's the time code to skip that. For the people who are still here, welcome to the patriarchy part of the video. And for my boys, what did you think about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? Pretty cool, right? Comment your thoughts on Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance down below. All right, guys. Imagine a time before cell phones, a time before Christopher Nolan, a time before Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Imagine a time before women's rights and autonomy, when women weren't allowed in the public sector of society, when whether you are at work or school, men would always be in your company, always taking the position in your mind as active beings, humans, while women were passive potential spouses. Look, women, I know men still act like this way too much, but I gotta lay down the foundation before we start talking about Zendaya again. Here's that timestamp one more time. Sure, you could raise a dowry and have this really great wife who could be smart and funny, but she would still be relegated to your home, to that private sector with the reproductive work of keeping the home. Keeping your home. She doesn't have time to care about your thoughts on Plato or Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. But the boys do. They care about Plato, about your thoughts on Plato, about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. They have the leisure time to complete the lecture readings necessary for your positing. Your wife can love you, but only the boys can know you. You know? This is why I don't think Art and Patrick are romantically in love with each other. I think they miss each other, they need each other, and through Luca's direction, it does appear very erotic, which is not a novel gaze in his work, but I think what they miss is being known by each other. They miss the game, the relationship they had with each other while playing the game, and they're frustrated in their inability to find proper challengers. They just can't articulate, or don't want to articulate, what they long for from their past friendship. So Tashi actively and knowingly takes up this position of a prize, a trophy wife, so Art and Patrick can pretend like they don't need each other. They're playing for Tashi because the boys can know you, but only your wife can inhabit this position of love, you know? Tashi does, and when she loses her agency, her ability to play tennis, it quickly becomes everybody's problem. Tashi doesn't want to be loved. She wants to be in service of tennis. Like, after a career-ending injury, Tashi quickly moves on to coaching. Tashi and Art's romantic relationship blooms because she recognizes Art's potential in his playing, his initial drive to become pro, and his belief that he needs her and her coaching in order to play professionally. Tashi loves Art partially because she loves tennis. Capital T tennis, because that's the tennis that matters. The tennis that's real. My favorite quote in the whole movie is, "Real tennis is like being in love." Or like being nothing at all. Just think about that for a sec. It's not real tennis is like falling in love. It's real tennis is like being in love. Right now. Present. Not thinking about what happens if you win or lose, just being there and knowing your opponent better than anyone else in the world. Connecting with this person deeper than anyone else ever could. Like being nothing at all, fully devoting yourself to the moment. Them doing the same. In real tennis, you play in bursts of like maybe 30 seconds, rallying until someone breaks and the ball hits the ground, and another point is scored. But those 30 seconds, those 2 minutes, that worship of knowing and being known, that worship of the moment, that worship of possibility. After facing a leg injury during a college meet, Tashi loses this position, which allows her access to the divine present forever. The injury is why she's an ex-rising star. She's relegated to the sidelines, always needing to advocate for her position as a legend, always fighting for her due, but never able to claim that lost potential glory. Never able to play real tennis. She can still watch it though. Still engage with the act to an extent. In Michael Pagis and Erika Summers-Effler's paper, Aesthetic Engagement, the authors discuss a theory of attention based on the work of William James in the context of appreciating a work of art. Attention, they claim, is made up of a spotlight, which illuminates a section or layer of the work that you are actively engaging with, and a fringe, or an external layer of content, which surrounds and contextualizes the spotlight. In the last 2 minutes of Challengers, my spotlight was focused on the volley between two very sweaty, very passionate men. We can assume Tashi engages with the scene in a very similar way, split between two men who haven't changed much in the 13 years she's known them. Patrick still playing for a future as a pro, Art still playing for Tashi, hoping to keep her favor. Both playing for some achievement rather than engaging in this act of striving, the struggle, the present to bring in some CT win. Tashi knows what these men are playing for. She shares our fringe attention in this match of two men with such history playing past each other for different motives, so violently focused on the end, the win, rather than the playing of the game. Patrick is ready for his next match, and Art would have likely retired if Tashi hadn't kept pushing him. If real tennis is like being in love, holding this intimate moment and complete understanding of an opponent, then Art and Patrick are desperately trying to avoid real tennis. They don't want to know each other. They don't want to play this game, but they do want to achieve Tashi's recognition and pride. In service to real tennis, in service to an aesthetic engagement of the match, Tashi consciously adopts her position of trophy. She keeps her autonomy, but she tells Art she'll leave him if he doesn't win the challenger, aligning with Patrick in service of tennis and victory. Immediately after, she tries to convince Patrick to throw the match, aligning with Art in service of love. Patrick refuses to agree to throw the match, and the two promptly hook up in his car. During their match, Art and Patrick offer each other equal sets. They're both neck and neck when Patrick subtly lets Art know about his affair, which spirals us into the final set. The match point of the film. The actual last 2 minutes. The tiebreaker. The now. June is a weird month this year. It's a weird month every year, but I'll be attending my 5-year high school reunion during this one. I just got a letter I wrote as a high school senior in the mail today, along with the reunion invite. I wrote really poorly, but it's fun to see what aspects of myself solidified and what aspects fell away over the course of a pandemic, a university transfer, a degree, published poems, 3 or 4 research projects, and this weird little YouTube channel where I talk about Ratatouille and random tweets. I was worried about reading this letter, about disappointing myself. So much has happened. So much hasn't. But I didn't disappoint myself other than, the writing being a little trash. I wish I had written more. I wish that was more meaningful, but I remember my high school English teacher telling me everybody wished that. I think that's just the problem of reaching for the past and the present. The only line that really got to me was, I don't really care if I'm a writer, just as long as I'm happy. Please be happy. I feel really good that I can say I am happy. It's not like I wasn't happy in high school or like when I was writing this either. I was just 18. I had things to worry about, like getting into college and taking on crippling debt. I was focused on achieving way more than I was on striving, existing in the moment. I didn't know what was going on, and I felt like I didn't have much control over anything. And all that is still true, but I've read more Camus, listened to some Alder, and transferred to universities during a pandemic. I feel calmer, more present. I'm no longer waiting for an imagined future. Now, this is not an argument for passivity. There are things we can and should do in our communities, but it is an argument for recognizing what is worth fighting for and how we can best fight for it. Are you just reposting? Or are you protesting, donating, letter writing, going out of your way to do rather than appear to be doing? Are your actions performative or are they real? There is no way for you to leave the sidelines in most conflicts. Sometimes the fight is not yours, but you can still be active in your vocal, known, tangible AFK support. You aren't there. You're here. Act like it. Please keep your critiques focused and relevant and do more than just critique. The people ingesting your content are spectators, so only make content to redirect back at the conflict at hand. And remember, it is impossible to play every game of tennis, but everyone can play at least one. A lot depends on just one game of tennis, and there is more than enough tennis games to go around. And I am still talking about tennis. I'm talking about real tennis. The moment, the right now, that Yahweh, that I am, that totally and completely present. You know what match you're supposed to play, and you know what that match requires of you. June is a weird month this year. It's a weird month every year, but I'll be turning 23 during this one. 23 years gone or past or whatever. I'm starting the 24th now. Good time for a quarter-life crisis. But I don't know, man. I'm just playing tennis. Trying to engage with my birthday not as just another year lost with a bunch of artifacts from positions I'll never return to, but as a marker for a new position in my life, with the next day tweaking that marker ever so slightly. Another adjustment on the next day. Focused more on the day part of the word instead of the birth, the signifier of things past. Not being passive or nostalgic in my life, but working to consistently understand the wonderful, beautiful, forever, ever-changing position of now. It's like that Master Oogway quote from Kung Fu Panda, which I saw on my birthday, by the way. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift.
That is why it is called the present.
It feels wrong to try and capture that feeling, especially in writing. It feels even more wrong to try and capture it in a video, a recording of any kind, but still, recording is the best way to spread any message, any philosophy, any lost present that we have. It's the push and pull of trying to do something best versus trying to do something perfect. Best is still thinking about the future, capturing some aesthetic essence of a moment so it can at the very least still live on in an echo of itself. Hopefully strong enough to still hold value and memory and meaning. Art is best. Writing is best. Storytelling is best. Memory is best. But perfect is divine. It's the everything everywhere all at once, all moments, all places, understanding the moments in tandem with each other as one thing, but also unique in their separateness. All details existing in the spotlight, nothing left in the fringe, completely unbreaking engagement. Away from performance, beyond performance. An impossibility worth striving for. For like the past 8-ish months, I've been trying to come up with a personal philosophy of art and aesthetic engagement. Turns out there's a reason why people are still working on this, but I've always felt it's important to define and articulate quality, which is pretty fucking hard when you kind of ruin it by stepping outside of it. And yet, when you're there, it's impossible to describe. That's why I mentioned I'm committing an art sin towards the start of this essay. I brought other art into the fray. I brought classic great works into the discussion of the last 2 minutes of Challengers. To make matters worse, I did it to highlight presentations of gender and sexuality between the three main characters. Sontag is rolling in her grave. Obviously, Challengers made me feel something. Obviously, it was an experience. Obviously, I think that work can exist on its own independently, and I didn't need Wilde or Sontag or Plato to talk about this movie, but I did it anyways. So why? Why even bother to try and tease out these details or sections of a work if it only served to bastardize the piece I'm trying to offer reverence to? Because of this. Because when I'm talking about Ratatouille, I'm not actually talking about Ratatouille, but my relationship to it. Because I'm no longer talking about an object, but an experience. It isn't Ratatouille as political object, but Ratatouille as personal artifact. I can't take you back to the moment where I first watched the last 2 minutes of Challengers. I cannot capture that, not really. But I can take a few steps back from the divine in order to more accurately point in the right direction. I can carry the tools and feelings that are useful from the past experience into the present. I can't fully explain the transcendental experience that is the last 2 minutes of Challengers with all of its reverence to agency in the present moment, but I can supplement that experience with my memories and knowledge and perspective of this work. Before watching this movie, I didn't care about tennis like at all. And yet the last 2 minutes of Challengers ended up being one of the most visceral and emotional experiences I've had with a work of art in a very long time. There's that beginning, that initial serve, and then there's that rally where players, challenger, spectator, audience, everyone is fully engaged in this moment as the camera's perspective shifts and floats around the court. The camera's movement doesn't change what's happening though. It moves to prove the camera can't change what's happening. It doesn't have the power to. All there is tennis. And it will end. It has to end. But right now, our players are striving to continue. Right now, it's real. We don't get to know who won the New Rochelle Challenger. It would ruin the movie a little if we did. But we do get an embrace between Patrick and Art. Art fully commits himself to real tennis as he jumps up for a final spike over the net. Patrick fully commits himself to love and connection and the moment when he rushes to catch Art instead of returning the ball. And Tashi watches what she's been waiting years for. Good fucking tennis. Art and Patrick knowing each other. and she yells the same phrase she yelled whenever she finished a moment of real tennis herself. And the moment breaks, and a new moment begins. Challengers is a movie about being alive.